Let me probably start by introducing myself. I'm Sajid. I'm the founder and CEO of RainLab Technologies. Shrees Motorsports before that, and we are also in the process of starting yet another startup called eAuto Technologies, which is going to be a electric vehicle powertrain solutions related startup. So that's about me. I'm a mechanical engineer basically, but I've been working with the cross domain areas. So automotive R&D fundamentally, and I have about 16 years of experience. And my core areas of focus is powertrain development and calibration, right, which means control systems as well. So that's about me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small you know deviation from how we usually do things, and I thought I would do this because there's an interesting thing which came up recently. There was a project which we were we've been kind of like asked to be a part of. So what I thought I would do is maybe basically like help you understand the careers in EV domain from the perspective of the project that we are working on, right? So the handout you have, that's our the typical the webinar materials which we do, but for today I'm going to be trying to do it from a slightly different perspective, and I hope this also gives a lot more of idea about what the EV domain actually is about and how you could build your careers in this. So let me move on. And so this is basically me trying to tell you that there is a much more better way, right? So before we go into that, I just wanted to ask you yet another question, right? So there's, I think we have about 15 people over here, and yet another question just to kind of like understand what you are basically like here for, right? So let me put this out here. So, how many of you here really understand what the EV domain is, and how many of you here are actually wanting to start a career in the EV domain, right? Maybe you don't know how to start your career. Maybe you're looking out for ways in which you can do this, but whatever it is, I mean, it's still fine. So great. So quite a lot of people who are not sure about how to start your careers, and I think for those 70% of the people, I think this is going to be of really much importance, because this is something where I'm going to talk to you basically from the industry perspective. Right. So what has happened is I spoke to you about a new startup. So when we were discussing, we approached a couple of clients, and one of the clients, I can't name them for reasons of confidentiality. They are an electric vehicle startup, but they are in the advanced stages of funding, and they're already present in the market as well. So they currently make e-auto rickshaws. So they supply. I mean, they supply. I mean, they procure their kits from China, and they assemble it in India, of course. So it was fine with them when they were selling about 20 pieces, 30 pieces a month. But right now they've reached a point where they have operations in India as well as in Africa. So now when that started happening, they started like facing a lot of quality issues, right? It's not that Chinese made kits are bad, but it's just that they were just not able to get the whole system to work together, which meant every time they sell a rickshaw, they are getting a lot of warranty claims, and any warranty claim is going to cost them money, right? And they also have supply chain problems. So right now, you know that every time there's a lockdown, there is all these things which keeps coming up. So their supply chain is also affected as of now. So they came to us asking if we could help us, if we could help them solve their supply chain problem. And what they wanted us to do is basically to build them a modular architecture, right? So what exactly is a modular architecture? To put it very simply, you build one electric vehicle platform and you use it for multiple applications. You know that in India currently, all the rickshaws that you see, I'm not talking about autos, but the rickshaws, the e-rickshaws. So these are vehicles which have less than a 2 kilowatt motor, and they primarily are used for very light load carrying application. Whereas our customer had a slightly different requirement, right? So he wanted to have some kind of understanding about how we could kind of take it to the next level. So the challenges he was currently facing is if he were to source a powertrain for each one of his application. Let's take for example, he has a passenger auto, and then there is a cargo auto, and then there is a 110 vehicle, and maybe he wants to also build a 310 vehicle. Now, every single time you have to build something like this, you'll have to go back to the government, and there is a process called as homologation, which means you take your vehicle, you give it to RI or ICAT, and you get them to test it. So they do their testing. It takes 3 months, it takes 6 months, and then they give an approval. And it is only after that you can actually go and start manufacturing this. Now, what exactly is the problem with that? Two things. For a startup, it's too much of time, right? Every single kit, if it takes 6 months, then they have four different applications. You're looking typically at about 1.5 years to get all of your kits approved. Second thing is the amount of cash that you spend. For every application, you would spend about some 15 to 20 lakhs on homologation, which meant quite a lot of their money is going to be spent on homologation if they have multiple kits. So they asked us if we could build a single kit which can be used for all these different applications. So they also said you would have to use only whatever modules is available in India. So when I say powertrain modules, I mean what motor is available in India and what motor controller is available. We cannot basically import anything. Battery packs, of course, is a different issue, but that is being taken care of by yet another vendor, another startup apparently. So batteries are taken care of. Now they wanted us to design a motor and the motor controller, and they wanted it to be one single application which can work for different body styles, different target areas, right? So this was the problem which we had, and I found it really interesting to kind of solve this, because that is where, like, even for you, when I start describing this, you will start understanding that the different areas which you will have to work to make this happen, right? And that will basically tell you what your career options could be. So, how this whole thing actually works is, we cannot just get whatever motor is available in the market and just put it into the vehicle and say, yes, everything is done. We definitely cannot do that, right? For various reasons. The primary reason is that we are now looking at an OEM application. Now, this vehicle is governed by a lot of different rules and regulations, which meant there is a definite process which we have to follow to make this happen. Right. So now this is where a lot of startups you see, they say, we are building a rickshaw, we are building an electric car, an electric bike. And what you do is just get a motor, put it together, build a prototype and say, hey, my product is ready. I'm going to go sell it in the market. Can you give me some money? You try raising money. It's not going to happen, right? Basically because, like, there's a lot of process which is involved in this. And take for example Ola Electric. Ola Electric, the two-wheeler, it has been in development for the last 2.5 years. 2.5 years, and they have just managed to kind of like take bookings for their scooters. Scooters is not even production ready, right? So why is it happening like that? That's because whenever you design anything for an OEM, I'm assuming you guys are going to go start working in OEMs, right? So you should be aware of this process. You cannot just go, you cannot take a motor, put it together and say it is done, I'm testing it, I'm publishing. No, you can't do that. There is a definite process, and this process is called as the product development life cycle, and this is called as the V model of development. So you always start with procurement analysis, and then you do a high level architecture design. So it could be something like, procurement is, I need a bike which can go 50 kilometers. That is all there is, right? There is no other requirement. Usually that's how customers say. And then you do a high level design. You say, okay, it's a bike. So do I go with a hub motor? Do I go with an onboard motor? Do I use a gearbox? Do I use a multi speed gearbox? All of those things is high level design. And once you have done the high level design, there is a step in between. It's called as vendor identification. You actually go and check which of these components are available in the market. Because unless, even if you're a big OEM, no one's gonna like immediately design a motor and give it to you for your specifications. You cannot say that I'm building a sports bike which can hit a top speed of 300 kilometers per hour, so I need a motor which can run to 10,000 rpm. No, not happening in India, right? You have to go with whatever is available in the market, and based on that you'll have to do your detailed design, which is the next step. So let's say I am looking for a 12.5 kilowatt motor, but what is available in the market is 10 kilowatts or 15 kilowatts. So now I have to take a decision. Do I go with 10? Do I go with 15? What is the pros and cons? Once I've decided with 10, then I go into the detailed design. So at the detailed design level, I design how the motor is going to be mounted at a place, where the battery is going to sit, what is the BMS going to look like. So all those detailed designs I do. Then finally, I move into the implementation. So usually, when you look at how startups work, or how people like who have not been in the OEMs, how they work, they directly get into the implementation phase here, right? So they just pick up stuff from the market. Basically, they do a vendor identification and they move into implementation. Whereas you do know that that is not the process. There is a definite process. And once we do the implementation, we are supposed to do three levels of testing. So the first one is unit testing. So unit testing is also called as system level integration. So you have to check if your motor and your motor controller, they are basically working together. Then you go to integration testing. Motor and gearbox, are they all working together? Finally, you do a system level testing or acceptance testing. So you wanted a bike which can travel a top, you can hit a top speed of 300 kilometers per hour and still do about 150 kilometers in range. That was your requirements. Now we are doing a system testing to make sure if those requirements have been satisfied, right? So this is the process which is basically involved in the whole development. And unless we are able to get this thing done, we are going to face a lot of issues, once it goes into the market and things like that, right? So I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but this is basically the difference. This is basically the reason why an OEM development work would probably take someone 2.5 years, like what it took for Ola. So you might say, it's not a big thing. We basically like can build a scooter maybe like in less than 3 months or something. Why is it that Ola is taking 2.5 years? You might have this question. Now, if you have the question, then this is basically the answer, because it is just not possible to do like how you would do it with your own small projects or something. This is the steps that you have to do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline the steps which we have done. So, of course, we have not reached detailed design. We are only at high level design, but I'll still go ahead and explain it and possibly see if I'm able to kind of like, throw some light on what your career options could be, right? So let me just check the polls quickly just to make sure you guys have done that. Right, so we have 11 of you from the mechanical sciences, two each from triple E and EC, and two from others. So great. So you have a nice mix and match of people. Super. Ajit, yeah, please put your questions in the questions tab. I'm going to answer those questions, right? And I'm going to take you through the entire design process as well. So you understand I'm able to answer all your questions. So now this is the steps that we have to do. So obviously, we started doing it, but what actually happens is, though I drew a very simple V model diagram here, actually how the process looks like is like this, right? Because it looks like this is why you need a 100-member team to build a scooter, right? Because you can't just jump in and do it. I've written it in a very simple thing, but whenever you do things, you know that there is a lot of mechatronic systems, mechanical and electronic system, and inside the electronic system you'll have to write software, you'll have to design your hardware. So there's quite a lot of things which basically goes into it. That's what you see on the screen. It is not as simple and elegant as what you see in the previous diagram, but this is how it is actually going to work, right? But don't worry about it. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to present it in a much more easier way for you to understand. So now we went back and we asked them, we asked our clients, the auto manufacturer, what your requirements were. So he's basically from a business background, and he's a marketing person, marketing finance person. So all he was able to tell us was, we did a market study, and we found out that the current e-rickshaws which is there in the market, they are not actually able to carry too much of load, right? So they told us that this vehicle should carry 1 tons. This is not IT, that is 1 ton. I think it's a small mistake from my side. So this is a 1 ton weight carrying capacity. So he's done some market research and he's just told me 1 ton capacity. Okay, what else is it? He said, we found that the certain auto rickshaws, e-rickshaws, when you load them with 1 ton of weight, and they really struggle to climb flyovers. Whereas if you have to tell this in probably cities like Chennai or Bangalore or Delhi, there's quite a lot of flyovers here, and our vehicle will definitely have to carry this 1 ton, and it has to climb the flyover. But okay, there is a big but. They're saying it is okay if it does just 10 kilometers per hour. We don't want it to travel at 50 kilometers on the flyover, but it has to at least travel at 10 kilometers per hour. Okay, good. And then there is a next one, which is a maximum speed limit of 80 kilometers per hour. That is government mandated. There is a rule which states that CMVR rule, which states all commercial vehicles can only have a maximum speed of 80 kilometers per hour. So of course we will take that into account, but because it saves a lot of design work for us. Because imagine if, like your bike, this guy wanted the vehicle to do 120 kilometers per hour, we would have had to basically do a lot of more compromises. But now, since there is a rule which states that this vehicle should not go beyond 80, we'll design it in a way that it doesn't go beyond 80, because no commercial vehicle will go beyond 80. We'll just fix it as the maximum limit. Now, there is a very interesting thing which comes here. So we specifically asked for this, and they took out their trip sheets, and they were able to calculate this and tell us that only about 60% or less of their trips are with load. So what this means is, if someone books an auto and they say, okay, I want to go from point A to point B, this auto is traveling empty until point A, takes that load, and then goes to point B. So right now, these guys have some tie-ups with major big-time e-retailers. So they are able to kind of optimize their things. But usually, you see any commercial vehicle will only have a less than 50% usage. Say, for example, I hire a vehicle to transport something from Chennai to Bangalore. Okay, a distance of about 400 kilometers. So from Chennai, it kind of like takes the load and it travels to Bangalore. But from Bangalore to Chennai, it is coming empty, which means only 50% of the trip is with the load. The rest of the times it's traveling empty. Now, this is a very important thing for us because it helps us further optimize the system. Okay, so are you guys? I mean, if you don't agree with any of these rules, so Pratik, please post it in the questions tab. I'll come back to the questions and I'll answer it. Right? If it is not answered in the webinar, I'll come back and I'll answer it. Right. So, is there any other requirements that you guys think you would have? If you think you need any other requirements, you could please note it down, or maybe you could post it as a question. We'll come back and try to answer it. Unfortunately, this is just a 1.5 hour webinar. If we had time, I could have kind of gone through the entire virtual development process. But since we don't, we're just going to like discuss what we have done so far. Right. So now this is the requirement that we have. Now we are supposed to build a powertrain. So when I say a powertrain, what it means is I have to supply to this person a motor, a gearbox, a propeller shaft, a differential, and I'll also have to tell him what size of wheels and rims to run. So I supply basically everything that generates torque and transmits torque. He makes the chassis, and he procures the battery from someone else and he puts it into it. Right. So that is the scope of the project which we had. And if you think why are they doing this, that's basically how all the automotive OEMs work. Tata does not manufacture the powertrain for the Nexon. They make the chassis, they get the batteries from somewhere, they get the motors, they just integrate everything and they sell it as a car. This is pretty much how most of the people do. Motor manufacturer is usually someone else, controller is someone else, and the OEMs, they just integrate things. So now we've just been acting as a design consultant, and we're also having to probably do some manufacturing as well. So now let's go forward and let's see how can we basically like attack this project. And as I start outlining the steps we took, right, this is a case study, should be a little interesting to you. I'll also show you what are the different career areas that you can build, right? Okay, so once we had these requirements, we had a follow-up meeting with the client, and we had mutually agreed that though they are currently using a 15 kilowatt motor from China, they said since 15 kilowatt motor is very rare in India, at least in this area. So it was decided that we would go with the 10 kilowatt motor, right? And we'll homologate it with a multi-speed gearbox. So the whole idea is we need 15, but we are going with a 10 kilowatt motor. We have downsized it. So a 10 kilowatt motor will be perfect for a 5 or 7 seater auto. It'll be perfect for maybe like small commercial applications. But since we are using a gearbox, we are trying to optimize the same 10 kilowatt motor to run a 1 ton weight, possibly up to 3 ton weight. I'm not sure if we can do 3 ton. We have not reached that point, but 1 ton weight definitely it is possible. So what we have done is we have eliminated complexities. You remember, because homologation it takes too much of time. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to make a multi-speed gearbox which will basically satisfy all requirements. For your information, 90% of the electric vehicles which come out, they come with a single speed gearbox. The reason for that is because of the torque characteristics of the motor. You can search it out on YouTube or something. But what we have decided to do is we will give the client a multi-speed gearbox, a CVT or an AMT or something like that, which would allow him to use a smaller motor for even bigger applications. Great. And the second thing we told him is don't go for a very big battery pack size. Instead, go with a small 5 kilowatt hour, or maybe like a 10 kilowatt hour maximum. Don't go for a big battery pack, and you can in fact swap it, because anyways their vehicles, their business model, it basically runs inside a city. They don't actually like go out of the city much, right? So we told them reduce the battery pack size. We'll go with the 5 kilowatt hour. It's not kilowatt, it has to be kilowatt hour. I'm sorry about that. Go for a smaller battery pack, but make it swappable, which means a driver is driving, he's running out of it, he can swap the battery pack out for a new one and he can continue with his trip. So this was what we had decided, and based on this we started working on the project. Now it's been almost 2-3 months since we started working on it, and this is basically how we started working. So how do we go about this, the steps which is going to be of importance to you? So the first thing what we did is we converted their requirements, right? The requirements were very fuzzy, because remember, all they told me was it should carry 1 ton, it should be 80 kilometers and 10 kilometers is the thing, and we are kind of running it with only 60% of it is loaded. And one more thing you'll have to understand is inside India, any vehicle you supply saying 1 ton is the maximum load capacity, our people will invariably load it with 2 tons. Overloading is something which is very common in India, and you as engineers will have to think of all these things, and you have to kind of like make sure that you are basically addressing these things, right? So what we basically did is we got it and we tried converting their fuzzy requirements into something which is very very specific for us. So here is career path 1 for you, which is in 1D modeling. So what exactly did we do in 1D modeling? For 1D modeling, we use MATLAB Simulink. We also use Modelica, but you can also use other software like Dymola, AME Sim, GT Power, Ricardo Ignite. There's quite a lot of 1D modeling packages out there, but since we had licensed versions only for MATLAB Simulink, and since Modelica was an open source thing, Open Modelica is open source, we basically used these two packages to figure out answers to these questions, right? So the questions we answered was, what is the torque required for an empty vehicle to achieve 80 kilometers per hour? So this is just the vehicle, the chassis, maybe driver with one cleaner, and if it is traveling at 80 kilometers per hour, what is the torque that we need? Right. Second thing, if we carry 1 ton weight on it, what is the speed that we need to achieve? So we decided we'll go with half of that 80, which is 40 kilometers per hour. So the reason we fixed 40 kilometers is also based on brake calculations. We figured out that at any speeds more than 40 kilometers per hour, this 1 ton vehicle will not stop in time. So we decided give just sufficient torque so that with the 1 ton load, this vehicle will achieve 40 kilometers per hour, not more than that. Okay, great, super. Which means we can ask the customer to save money on brakes. He doesn't have to put a big brake because your vehicle is now going to do 80 kilometers per hour, right? It's going to be stuck at 40 kilometers, and that's how it has been designed. Maybe not 40, it can do 45, it can do 35, depending on other conditions. But we decided we'll calculate for 40 kilometers per hour. Then again, we calculated another torque which would carry the 1 ton weight on a flyover and achieve 10 kilometers per hour. Now the flyovers will have various gradients. So usually like about 5 to 7 degrees of gradient is what is acceptable. I think 10% or 12% gradient is what is acceptable. That's what most of the flyovers, the maximum flyovers, that's what it is. Of course, if you go to hilly areas, the hills themselves might be more steeper, but we are not at present designing this vehicle for hilly areas. We are designing it for urban use inside the city, and it has to carry that 1 ton and it has to climb a flyover and achieve 10 kilometers per hour. So what we got was we were able to get three different torque values for different operating things. We also calculated torque values from what is called as a drive cycle. So remember the homologation? I said you'll have to send your car to vehicle to ARAA for testing. So there they will test it using drive cycle. We also got the torque requirements from there. So now it is easy for us to do this once we have a mathematical model, because we can very rapidly like do a lot of different iterations, design iterations, and we can get exactly the amount of torque that would be needed to drive the vehicle. So this is exactly what you would be doing if you were to develop a career in 1D modeling, right? So if you were to join somewhere as a 1D modeling engineer, currently this happens at companies like Tata Elxsi, Fiat Chrysler, and Automotive Robotics India, Renault Nissan, RNBC. So all of these things, they have requirements for 1D modeling engineers, and these are the type of questions for which you will have to get the answers. And of course, we being we, since we were kind of designing the gearbox, what we did is we converted all these torque requirements into something like a gear ratio, because we know our motor can only produce 100 newton meters of torque, let's say, for example. But the torque required to carry a 1 ton weight and achieve 10 kilometers per hour on a flyover, let's assume it is about 1200 newton meters. So 100 newton meters is my motor, but 1200 newton meters is what is requirement, which means I can now design a gear ratio to meet that particular area. I need to achieve 80 kilometers per hour. I can design a gear ratio to meet that. So typically what I'm going to have is a 3-speed or a 4-speed CVT, or some that kind of a gearbox, which will basically allow me to operate the vehicle at different areas, irrespective of whatever size the motor is. So my motor size is fixed, but still I would be able to go and I would be able to match out the driving requirements in different conditions. So that's what I've done here. So that's the first step we did, and we did this by using 1D modeling, right? So I think that should answer quite a lot of your questions here. What software did we use, and things like that. So this is going to answer that question for you. Now, after we did this, what did we actually get? We got specifications. So I know that I need a motor which is not 10 kilowatts, but we needed a motor which was actually like around 10.5 or 11 kilowatts. So we decided to go with the 12 kilowatt motor. So we were fortunate enough that that was available. So we told them, okay, let's take a 12 kilowatt motor. And I mean, we are basically doing the high level design here, the very first, second step. And we decided, okay, 12 kilowatt motor will definitely be sufficient. We've done that. And we know that these are the gear ratios that we need. So we started talking to a gearbox manufacturer. And we can also calculate how much current will be drawn by this motor in various areas. So we can also validate our claim of a 5 kilowatt hour battery pack. And 5 kilowatt is sufficient, but if needed, we can go up to 7.5 or 8 kilowatt hours of battery pack. We can go, because some customers might say, I'm living too far away from town, I need to have maybe a bigger battery pack. Then we are like, okay, fine, we can kind of make this vehicle in such a way that you can accommodate much more higher kilowatt hours if needed, right? So next thing what we did is, we have the motor, or assuming we have the motor, now we need to control this motor, right? Because you need a motor controller, and this motor controller will also have to control your gearbox, which means we need a controller that can allow the motor and the gearbox to operate at all the optimal points. Because without this, you cannot control a multi-speed gearbox, right? You cannot go with a mechanically controlled gearbox because it doesn't really work, because like you have various scenarios here. So it has to be a little intelligent enough to figure out what load it is carrying, and what kind of a road condition it is, and based on that it has to kind of control your gearbox. Because say for example it is fully loaded on a flyover, you'll have to select the lowest possible gear so that you're able to pull this load and you're able to climb up, right? So we had to design a controller, but you know that a controller design is not an easy thing. So we went into MATLAB Simulink. We first did the control strategy, and then we tried to calibrate it according to our needs. We started doing some virtual testing, and finally, what we did is we decided we will go with an NXP evaluation board, because at this point of a time we cannot go approach Bosch or someone and ask them to supply a controller. So we had to kind of make do with whatever was available. So we knew that we could purchase this hardware. So we did a virtual prototyping. So we did some HAL testing and things like that to make sure that before we go and place an order for 200 boards, we wanted to make sure if it will work fine or not, right? So we did quite a lot of testing, and then now we have placed order for 10 boats. So once the 10 boats come, we'll do a physical testing as well. So this is the second area for you, which is control design. Now both the first area and second area is domain agnostic, which means you can be from EEE or ECE or mechanical or even computer science or civil engineering, and you would still be able to do this, right? Because you all you have to do is learn one single tool, which is MATLAB Simulink, and learn some knowledge about how to do these things. You will be able to go forward and design these things, right? So you don't have to worry about something saying hey, I'm from a mechanical engineering background, how do we go design control? Isn't that something from ECE? No, it is not like that. Though the subject might be from ECE, you would still be able to work on it provided you have the requisite knowledge. Great. So the career 2 is also done. So what did we do next? Third thing is, now we've kind of done some virtual testing, right? And we've also got some, we have not got to this phase, but this is what we are going to be doing. So now what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are doing a very complete and thorough testing, right? So we need to develop test plans. We need to do some virtual testing. So we use hardware in the loops. We do a lot of automated testing, because say for example, I'm trying to figure out how long does it take for my headlight bulb to fail. I'm going to put a headlight bulb in it, and I'm going to say anytime, or a tail light flasher, and I'm going to say anytime that my vehicle is climbing a flyover, it's going at less than say 20 kilometers per hour, switch on the rear tail lights and start flashing it, so people from behind will know that okay, this is a slow moving vehicle and they have to probably take care. So now I cannot take that as it is and I can't go and give it for homologation. They'll ask, did you do a life cycle test on it? How many cycles did this run before it started failing? So imagine the amount of manual labor will be involved if I'm making someone switch on a bulb, switch it off, switch it on, switch it off, and then making a note every time they do it. I'm doing it manually. Absolutely not happening. So for that reason, we have some automated testing methodologies, prototypes, and all those things. We call it as in-loop testing, right? So it can be hardware in loop, it can be model in loop, software in loop, driver in loop, vehicle in loop. There's quite a lot of things which is available. So that is something which we need to do, right? That's basically ensuring the hardware prototypes meet the requirements. And then most importantly, I'll have to sit and imagine what are all the different conditions that can happen on the road, right? So I have to imagine that a driver is driving and suddenly he decides to press both the brakes and the throttle. Maybe someone is switching on the indicator and then switching on the headlight also, and then he's braking. So is there anything which is probably going wrong with it? So I write an exhaustive test case, and all the test cases we need to test, right? There is no other way, we have to test it. And then finally, if some component does fail, say for example, maybe once I have some 10 vehicles under testing, in two of the vehicles my motor gear, maybe my gearbox mount has broken, right? I have a mechanical failure. Now I cannot say okay, it is just two of it, 10 of it is, 8 of it is fine. Do we still need to go and worry about it? No, I cannot leave it to chance like that. right? Because it's OEM, because it's homologation, we need to do those root cause analysis as well. So these are all the things which comes under a testing and validation career path, where you are expected to basically run the test. You are basically expected to write test cases, and of course, I'm not even getting into that. There is a whole lot of things which is available, which is there in the the systems part of it. So you'll have to write documents, you'll have to write diagnostic procedures. There's a whole lot of things which covers under this career path, right? Okay, so now I've taken the requirements, I've converted into specifications, I've done all those 1D modeling, I've also designed controllers, I've prototyped controllers, and I've also tested it and validated it, right? So is there all career paths there is in an electric vehicle domain? Nope. We have a very important career path which is called as systems engineering. Now imagine I go back here, right? See the number of different teams that's working, right? And maybe the person who's developing the computer aided styling CAS, right? So he's a pure mechanical engineer who's working with CATIA and he's rendering it in Alias. Now there is a person who's basically designing a battery pack design, and he's from an electrical background. Now the computer aided stylist will have to work with this electronics guy to basically understand his requirement in terms of space. Because if the CAS guy has put a very weird design, and if you're not able to fit your battery pack inside, things are not going to work, right? So there has to be someone who basically understands pretty much everything there is that all the other teams do. And what they do is they engineer the whole system, and they also act as translators between different teams. So now the electronics guys will come and say, hey, the light bulb I have, you need to send a CAN message with this particular ID, with this particular thing, and then it starts working. Maybe for an electronics guy, maybe maybe a controller designer guy, that makes perfect sense. But you give it to a mechanical guy who's basically setting up the whole wiring or something, and he's actually fixing it in the car. He's like, what exactly does that mean? So you say CAN message comes, this will switch on, but where is the CAN message coming from? Where do I go fix it to? And imagine with a team of 100 or 150 people, unless there is someone who's sitting on top and monitoring everything, giving everyone very specific written documents, this whole thing is not going to work. And that is the fourth career path, which is called as systems engineering. For those of you who are not aware of systems engineering, this is a branch of study which was developed by NASA along with MIT, right, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Because NASA, when they were building their spacecraft, they had thousands and thousands of people working on one small spacecraft, maybe a satellite, and they had to make sure that everyone was aware of what the requirements were, what specifications were there, and they had to be aware of the goals that is there. So unless that happens, the team doesn't work together, right? A small interesting thing for you. Just go to YouTube and search for Mars rover. Okay, so this happened sometime, I think, in 1990s or something. So NASA spent hundreds of millions of dollars and sent a spacecraft, a rover, to Mars. And while it was landing on Mars, the whole thing crashed, and basically about 7-8 years of work went down the drain, and they lost millions of dollars as well. They then found out that it happened because the person who designed it initially, he said that you'll have to use Newton meter for torque. But the person who built it, the company which built it, it was in America, it was Lockheed Martin, if I'm not wrong. They assumed that 100 Newton meter was actually 100 foot pounds. No, pound feet, LBFT, yeah, pound feet, right? So there was a small miscommunication, but this guy said, I written it in the document is 2000 pages. So systems engineering is a very new and upcoming discipline. You have courses from MIT University on systems engineering, where they teach you how to take a complex project, split it into manageable tasks, give it to the teams, and make sure all the teams understand things. So that is this fourth branch, which is systems engineering, right? So in our case, what we have to do is, since I'm the CTO of the company, what I did is I sat down, I wrote out the entire process manual, drew the block diagrams, and I mean we were a small team of 10, so everyone is sitting in front of me. So anything they just ask me or I look at their work. So it was easy for us. We didn't exactly do systems engineering for this project, but if you are doing the same project at an OEM level, you will have to be aware of systems engineering as well, right? Finally comes something which you guys are probably very much aware of, which is CFD, CAE, and CAD, which is product design for electric vehicles. So you could basically design battery packs, you could basically design holders for batteries, you can decide some cooling systems for batteries, and a whole lot of things like that, which is again like, a traditional engineering domain, and nothing very new or novel about it. It is just what we've been doing for ages now. So these are the 5 different careers which I've kind of identified, right, based on whatever project that we did. So we actually have CFD engineers who made sure that the battery packs are getting cooled properly. We had a CAE engineer who was testing for vibrations, because every time you remove a battery pack and put it back in, the terminals, the post, and other things, they start like, there is arcing which happens, there is vibrations which happens. So we need to make sure none of those things break. So we were kind of like, we had a CAE guy who was basically taking care of this entire thing, and that was the 5th career path which we basically had, right? So just to recap, we have 5 different career paths. So the first one was 1D modeling, which is all about designing the whole system without getting into specifics. It is all about translating requirements from a colloquial language, saying I need a car which can travel at 200 kilometers per hour, into what torque is needed, what gearbox is needed, what kind of a wheel size is needed. That's basically what we do at 1D modeling. And you'll have to understand, 1D modeling is a repetitive process, and for every 10 jobs that is needed in 1D modeling, at the end of the thing, career 4 and career 5, you'll have one job, right? So it's also in the arranged in the order of number of jobs which is available. So you go search for MATLAB or Simulink in Naukri, you'll probably get 8,000 jobs. You go search for CFD or CAE, you'll get some 100 jobs, right? Not the jobs are not there, but the relative number of jobs which is there for 1D modeling is huge, because 1D modeling is where you do some rapid design iterations, and you figure out if something is going to work or if it's not going to work. So all of those things you basically do it with 1D modeling. Then comes the second one, which is all about control design, right? Third one is testing and validation. Again, quite a lot of jobs. A lot of testing validation from US and Europe gets transferred into India, so there is a huge scope for you there as well. And finally, systems engineering and CAD, CAE, CFD. So now you have to kind of understand which career path you need to focus on. So if you think CAD, CAE, CFD is all that you can do, then you have to be ready to compete with quite a lot of people, because every person passing out is going to be interested in CFD. And this is again something which only mechanical sciences students can do. A triple E or an EC person can't do this, but they can definitely do systems engineering, testing, control design, and modeling, right? And you as mechanical engineers can also do 1D modeling, control design, testing, validation, systems engineering, and probably CAD, CAE, CFD as well. So what does this all mean, right? So the key takeaways is 2 things. First one is, there is absolutely nothing called as an electric vehicle design course, right? If someone says, can you teach me electric vehicle design? Or rather, if someone says, I can teach you electric vehicle design, they probably like, they don't understand what they're talking about, right? Electric vehicle is only the domain. You take anything which we have done, we have separate skill requirements for each of the career path. So mathematical modeling, you can do 1D modeling. Control system design, you can do controller design. And you combine these 2 things, you can do combined 1D modeling. So those are all areas which actually like people do work on, right? So all you'll have to do is, you'll have to kind of like, you have your own core skills, right? You've done your mechanical engineering or triple E, you're good with circuit analysis or maybe circuit design, whatever it is, keep it that side. But on top of it, you need to have a very strong domain knowledge, And once you have a very strong domain knowledge, you develop skills in tools, and that is what you use to build careers. And it is not that you can just learn about electric vehicles and immediately you get a job. Nope. Because industry, this is what they ask you to do. So if you want to come join my company, I would probably look at this one question: what is that problem which you can solve for me? So right now we need a person who can basically do an IoT implementation on our controller. So if you come to me and say I can do it, then I need to know that you're aware of the electric vehicle domain, because without knowing it, you cannot build dashboards for me. I need to know that you're good with your sensors, actuators, because you need to understand what devices you're connecting to. You have to be good with cloud-based systems, because you'll have to figure out how to take the sensor data, push it to the cloud. And finally, you need to also build dashboards, which means you'll have to be good with Python or data visualization or something like that as well. So this is basically how it works in the industry. There is no course which says electric vehicle design per se. It is just a collection of multiple talent areas which we put together and present to you as electric vehicle course. And as you have seen, we have identified 5 different career paths. Of course, there are more career paths. There is communication design, there is cyber security, there is compliance, and the traditional things: manufacturing, supply chain management. But we are not getting into that. I'm just looking at careers where there is a lot of jobs which is available. A lot of jobs is available because there is no place where they basically teach these things. So there's quite a lot of openings which comes up in that, right? So moving on, what is it that you should do to basically convert these information into a career, into a job or something like that, right? So the basic thing which you need to do is, before you move anywhere forward, you need to master the domain. So when I say master the domain, what I mean to say is, you need to know every single part of the electric vehicle, right? Because you might not work on it, but still when you get into the automotive field, they'll ask you, do you know how an ABS brakes work? They might be taking you in as a BCM control engineer, but they will still ask you about brakes, right? They will still ask you, maybe you're a mechanical engineer, they'll ask you, if my motor, a 5 kilowatt motor, it's been continuously run for 20 minutes, what do you think is the amount of energy it will draw from the battery? You might be designing maybe cooling systems for motor, but they still do ask questions like that. So which means primarily you need to be very strong in the domain. And recently, with all the work from home and other things which have come up, people have actually started focusing a lot more on your domain skills, right? And then you need to pick up skills in one or more areas. So one or more areas is 1D modeling and maybe CFD CAE. The reason you do that is because we are witnessing a flux, right? There's a lot of changes which has been happening, and industries basically, their demand also varies with time. So Tata Motors maybe is concentrating, or maybe let's take Ola is concentrating on two-wheelers right now, but next if they jump into vehicle, they will need vehicle dynamics, right? They will no longer need a vehicle dynamics engineer with two-wheeler expertise. They'll need one with four-wheeler expertise, which means they might actually fire you. That's how industry works. They're all about cutting cost. So whenever your skill set becomes redundant, you are replaced. So in order to avoid that from happening, you need to make sure you have at least one or two areas where you have those skill sets. And then what you need to very importantly do is, if you guys are freshers, you need to work on industry projects which highlights your skill sets. It is not about just doing a mini project, or getting a certification from someone and saying, hey, I have the skill set. No, it's not like that. Certificates don't matter anything at all. It is zilch, right? In today's world, it is zilch. What they look at is, I don't mind even if you don't have, if you're not completed your degree, we still want to know if you can basically work on this project, right? The industry is moving towards that, and it will not be long before that happens. So which means, starting today, you need to work on building some projects. You need to work on like building some resume for yourself. Resume in the sense, I mean, a project collection of projects which will highlight your skills to the interviewers. And finally, once you have done this, it is time for you to basically like put out your resume, reach out to recruiters, and see if you can land your jobs, right? So this is basically what you guys need to be doing to start building your careers. And This now is about how RainLab can help, right? So I've told you about the careers, I've told you about the softwares you need to learn, and possibly also about how you could probably move forward and confirm or convert this information into a job, right? That's what I've told you. So now, how can we help? What is the advantage with RainLab? RainLab is an edutech company. So what is it that we do? Three things, primarily three things. Myself, my founders, my co-founders, we are all industry people, right? We are not from an academic background. I mean, though, yeah, we have academic expertise, but we are from the industry, which means we worked with OEMs, we continue working with OEMs, we continue doing that on one side, and we have the domain expertise, right? I don't simply come here and sit and talk about things. I talk because I work in those fields. That's one thing. Second thing is we have experience in instructional design as well. Instructional design is basically how do you teach something to a student so that they understand it in a much more better way. I work with BITS Pilani. I've been doing it for the last 4 years, and one thing I've learned is basically the difference between what a student learns at a college like BITS, or maybe some of our tier 3 tier 4 colleges, is more about how the faculty is teaching the student, right? So I've learned that. I have my own certification courses. I have 4 years experience teaching here. I have 2 more years prior to that with in industrial L&D as well. So we bring that instructional design experience, and we try teaching the same thing that these guys at BITS Pilani do. So every semester we have some 150 students from all the top colleges join us for internships. So we kind of like interact with them. So we learn from them and we try to give it to you. So now, of course, the first two things are more about what we can teach, how we can teach. But the third most important thing is because we've been in the industry, because we have exposure to the HR side of things as well. I would say we are slowly building up a capability where we can observe students and we can help them get placements, right? This is not placement guarantee, right? It's not placement guarantee, but it is placement assistance. We cannot say that just because you join our course you'll get a job. No, that can't happen. But if you do join our course, if you do perform well, if you're really putting in that hard work, then we can make it easy for you to land really good jobs. So I'll get back to you. I'll tell you like why is it that you should probably come to us for your jobs and not maybe like toward. One thing is most of the recruitments it happens for experienced people, right? But when you go through certain recruitment agencies, then there's always this understanding that you do get a much better choice at, I mean, chance at probably like landing jobs. And a lot of these recruiters also have they've pre-booked jobs. So some company tells them, I need 20 model-based design engineers for the next 6 months. So then these guys have that requirement, so they will recruit and they'll place you directly. So that is basically the placement assistance we do. We have MOUs with these consultants and recruiters, and we try leveraging it for your benefit. Right. So this is what we are going to offer. And of course, I mean, there's all these things like why we're talking about it is coming to our curriculum, right? So this is our basically our, we call it as the Electric Vehicle Masterclass or EVMC, which is a 3-month online plus a 3-month project-based learning. So it's basically a 6 months program that you can choose to do completely online, or you can also go for a blended mode. So for those of you who are available to travel down to Chennai to our place, we can offer some hands-on experience with things as well. So if you are someone who you have not seen what an electric vehicle is, you need to see something with your eyes, and you are okay with traveling, then you are always welcome to visit our facility as well. But predominantly, our teaching it is through e-learning and instructor-led videos. So we have recorded modules which you basically learn all the theory from, and then we have instructor-led classes where one of our instructors, myself included, we would be hand holding you, we'll be helping you work out some problems, we'll be helping you build projects and things like that. What we cover in this, it ranges from automotive fundamentals. So if you are from a EEE or an EC background, you don't know anything about cars, we have modules which teach you that. Say you are from mechanical, but you've never seen how an engine works, or you've never seen how a gearbox works, we have modules to cover that. So starting from there, we kind of take you step by step. We teach mathematical modeling, control systems, powertrain, electric vehicle domain, IoT, triple E. We kind of cover the entire spectrum. We have around close to about 6, 7 different subjects, totally averaging to about almost about 100 plus hours of e-learning programs. And then we have another 100 plus hours of instructor-led programs, and then you have your projects and your own effort which you put in, which means there's a very intensive, very well thought out program which takes you from an absolute nobody. I mean, even if you have no idea about what the automotive domain is all about, we take you from there and we make you job ready. So this is a finishing school which has been designed in collaboration with a couple of OEMs, and also with the feedback which we get from the OEMs. And of course, once you finish your course, we start your placement preparations. We train you on how to attend interviews, how to present yourself. And finally, through our HR consultant network, we also help you get your placements. Right. So this is what our program is all about. And this program, we have kind of dropped the price down to 50,000 rupees. We used to be having it at 1,25,000 earlier, but right now you have it at 50,000 rupees. And this is available for you to pay as EMIs as well. So now, probably a quick question for you: if you guys have seen what is here, and if you would like to join a program, you could just basically answer on the poll. But even if you are not sure about what this is going to do for you, if you want to take some more time and decide, please do let us know. Please just click on the contact us button. Just go there and vote on it. What we'll do is, if you have more questions, if you want to understand more in detail about it, we'll let you probably like book a 15-minute session with me at a mutual convenient time, and we'll sit with you, we'll talk to you, we'll basically understand what your requirements are, and we can build this program for you. Right. And just on a off-topic discussion, this program is something which we are currently like offering for quite a lot of people from the industry as well. Mercedes-Benz, for example, MBRDI, we are doing a version of this program for them. We are doing it for Renault Nissan. So quite a lot of industry people, they take up this program to basically upskill their employees as well. If you remember the first slide which I showed, those are the companies with which we are working currently. So this basically allows us to understand your interest in the program. If you really want to do this, we could probably ask our team to get in touch with you, right? So guys, if you have not voted on it, please go ahead and do that, so it becomes easy for our team to understand what your requirements would be, right? And finally, before we go into questions, there's something which I want you to think about. Don't think about your career as your first job, right? Don't think that why should I do something like this? Can't I just go get a job somewhere? Your career is not just what you immediately do today, right? You seldom make a career that way. We frequently, because I've been in the industry for 16 years, 17 years now, we frequently see people make this mistake. They don't think of where they are headed. They just put their head down, they just take the next step. And before you know it, 10 years down the line, you are stuck with, a vendor management or a supply chain management job, whereas what you wanted to become was maybe an automotive designer or something like that. So careers are basically your 15-year plan, right? Where do you want to be 15 years from now? Look at that and look at what the future is going to be like, and then start working towards it, right? So that's a piece of advice from me. And if you have not answered the poll, please do go and answer it. It would help us understand your requirements. If it would help us like understand like if this was in line with your needs and requirements, right? So now I think we can go with the this thing. I'm sorry. Let's close it out. I can go into the questions. So let me start projecting the questions and start answering them one by one, right? So which software is used in EV design? Ajit, there is no single tool. We use MATLAB Simulink, sometimes Scilab, sometimes 1D modeling tools. We use 3D modeling tools as well. So I hope I have answered your question already. How do you properly maintain an EV battery and motor for better life? Motor is basically maintenance free. You don't have to do anything for it. But EV battery also, you don't have to do anything because there is a BMS system which is built into it. So you just follow whatever it says on your manual. Charge it, use it, and that's it. As long as you don't abuse it, maybe use it in very hot environments or something. It's basically, there is control system which basically like helps you take care of all of these things. So Sagar, which CAD software is used in automotive industry? There's quite a lot again. There's quite a lot again. You start with basics like AutoCAD. You're still using that, and then you go into CAE, CFD. There's quite a lot of CAD softwares which is being used. I mean, pretty much everything is being used. Is what I would say. To learn simulations related to EV, Pratik, I would say visit MATLAB Simulink website. They have a lot of self-paced tutorials which is available, or search on YouTube. You have a lot of YouTube videos which can teach you that. Minimum weight for EV, Amit. I don't think there's a minimum weight, right? There's nothing called as a minimum weight. You could probably uh, design it to suit your needs. I don't think there is a minimum weight requirements. Automotive diagnostics course. Okay, see, this is a course which will help you start your career as an automotive technician. So if you want to basically start your own workshop or go work somewhere as a service technician, we teach you the fundamentals of automotive systems. We teach you what all problems can come in that, and how do you basically solve it. We teach you to use CAN tools. We teach you to do some electrical diagnosis, electronic diagnostics. So all of those things are covered in it. So after, what you can do is, I'll ask Raj to get in touch with you with a bit more of details on that. You're using a 72 volt hub motor. Oh, okay, 72 volt. Okay, the first time I'm seeing a 72 volt, 30 ampere hour. So that's around 2 kilowatt motor. Lithium iron phosphate battery. Any suggestion from your side how to use properly? Okay, Ankush, what motor controller are you using? What BMS are you using? If you don't mind, if you could send me an email to sajit@rainlab.com. I think we can take this offline, because I don't think there is just a one-line solution I can give for this. If you could please email me, or Raj, if you could send Ankush my email ID, I can probably get back to you with more details. We'll need to have a more detailed discussion on this. It's not a simple question to answer. Which coolant is required for cooling the battery? Abhishek, cooling the battery, typically in Indian conditions, you can't use coolant. Most of the heavy vehicles, they use refrigerants. You use R14, your air conditioning refrigerant. That's what you need to use, because coolant might not be sufficient for cooling really big batteries. The courses are closed. Pratik, I think that's because we do it. We do it based on an individual needs. So you can always get in touch with Raj. I think he'll be able to help you out with, or just type. I mean, get into the chat box over there and just post your question there. I'll ask Raj to get back to you on this. Raj, if you're here, probably if you could look into Pratik's needs, would be great. Any course regarding Simulink? No, we don't do with Simulink alone, because you go to MathWorks, they have a lot of on-ramps available, tutorials, interactive tutorials available. So you could basically go do that, Pratik. It's available free of cost. So we didn't want to recreate whatever was available free of cost. So we haven't done that, right? The garage is open. Yes, we have opened after almost 4 months. Last week is when we opened. So yes, hopefully, God willing, we are open. We will continue to be open. Great. Thank you, Pratik. And I think that's with the questions. Let me check if there's anything left on the, probably the chat box. Mohammed, yes, you can apply for placements. See, what you'll have to understand is we cannot guarantee placements, because that entirely depends on your performance. Anyone who says placements are guaranteed, especially in the automotive sector, it's probably not true. But yes, you can apply for placements through our consultancy services. I mean, consultants we work with, they'll help you get placements. If our questions are answered, then we'll think for payment. I'm sorry, Ankush, I didn't kind of. get your question right. I mean, I'm not sure I understand your question, but okay, maybe I did answer you here. Pratik, I'm okay. It's here. How many days program is there for 50K? This is a 6 month program. 6 months, 3 months of learning and 3 months of project. Project is also internship. If you have already graduated, it will get converted into an internship. Um, right. Joseph, my email ID is there in the chat box. It's sajit at rainlab.com. And Ankush, I think your question was regarding the batteries. So I will not be able to answer it. And I mean, it's not something which you answer so simply. If you can email me on sajit at rainlab.com, I'll get back to you with more details on it. I need to understand what you have done, and I'll probably get back to you. Please give me a day or two's time. I'm in Hyderabad. Like I said, I'm at the BITS Pilani campus. I reach Chennai late on Sunday night, so I can probably get back to you probably by Monday afternoon or something. Okay. So great. And I think we can wrap up the session with this. So